Night had its own kind of honesty. When the lights went out and the walls stopped pretending, everything, fear, ambition, desire, came crawling out from hiding. Amara had learned to love that kind of silence. It didn't judge, just watched. The Sterling mansion slept soundly that night. But she didn't. She sat on the edge of her narrow bed, a flashlight dimmed beneath a blanket, studying a sketch of the study room. Every corner, every outlet, every possible camera angle. It wasn't stolen. She'd drawn it herself from memory. The drive she needed, Richard Sterling's encrypted device, sat inside a locked cabinet behind his desk. She'd seen it once when he met with a senator 2 months earlier, tucked neatly in a velvet box like treasure. That drive was her future, her father's justice, her weapon. But one mistake, one noise too loud, and she'd be gone, erased like her family's name. Still, she couldn't wait any longer. The window was closing, and she knew it. By 1:15 a.m. the mansion was asleep. The rain from earlier had faded to mist. The hallways were dark, the only light coming from the soft blue glow of security monitors in the foyer. Amara moved like a whisper, barefoot, clothed in black, her maid uniform traded for silence itself. Every step was calculated, every breath measured. She passed the grand staircase, the portraits watching her like ghosts. Richard's face smiled down from the largest one. His painted eyes proud, powerful, deceitful. She didn't look away. She wanted him to see her, to remember this night, the one where the prey stopped running. At the door to the study she paused. The handle was cold. She slipped a thin pin from her pocket, the same one she'd used before, and picked the lock. Her hands didn't shake this time. When the door clicked open, she slid inside, shutting it behind her softly. The room smelled of smoke and money. Moonlight stretched across the floor, cutting the room in half, one side shadow, one side silver. She went straight to the cabinet. It was newer than before, stronger, secured with a digital lock. A small green light blinked in rhythm. She crouched and pulled out a small flash drive. Not hers, Ethan's. She'd borrowed it from his study a week ago when he wasn't looking. It had basic encryption software. Not much, but enough to override a simple security pattern. She plugged it in. The light flickered red, then yellow. "Come on," she whispered. Her heart pounded as the seconds dragged. And click. The door unlatched. Inside, nestled like gold, was the small velvet box she'd been chasing for months. Amara lifted it carefully. It was heavier than she expected. A single black drive inside, engraved with the initials RS. For a moment, her throat tightened. She could almost see her father's face. The disappointment, the exhaustion, the way he looked the day they lost everything. "I'm going to make them remember you," she whispered. "I promise." She slipped the drive into her pocket, shut the cabinet, and turned to leave. And froze. The door handle moved. Her heart stopped. A step. Low. Heavy. Familiar. Richard Sterling's voice murmured from outside. "What the hell?" She darted behind the curtain, the same spot she'd hidden once before. Her body pressed against the wall, every muscle tight. The door opened. He stepped inside, half-dressed in his robe, holding a glass of whiskey and his phone. "Security logs said motion in here," he muttered to himself. "Damn sensors again." He set the glass down, looking around. Amara held her breath. She could hear the ice melting in the glass, the ticking of the clock, her own heartbeat violent and loud. Then his phone rang. He answered. "Yes, Oz. No, I didn't authorize that withdrawal. Check the Hong Kong account." His voice hardened. "If anyone touches those funds, I'll have them ruined." Hong Kong account. Another clue. Another piece of the empire built on her father's bones. He sighed, muttered something, and finally left, closing the door behind him. Amara waited 30 more seconds before moving. When she finally stepped out, her hands were slick with sweat. But she had the drive. She had proof. She'd done it. Back in her room, she hid it beneath the mattress, pacing in the dark. She couldn't risk plugging it into any device in the mansion. Not yet. She needed privacy, somewhere quiet, off-grid, unseen. The library in town opened early. The computers there were old, disconnected from the Sterling network. That would be her move at dawn. She barely slept. By sunrise, Amara was gone before anyone else awoke. She wore a plain jacket over her uniform and carried a tote bag, just another maid running an errand. The streets outside smelled of rain and coffee. The library was nearly empty when she arrived. She sat at the farthest corner, plugged in the drive, and waited as the files loaded. What she saw made her hands go cold. Dozens of folders. Offshore accounts. Transfers under fake charities. Bank statements connected to names she recognized. Politicians, judges, CEOs. And there, at the center, was the file that broke her heart. Acquisition. Williams Industries. Her father's company. She opened it. Emails. Legal documents. Photos. It wasn't just theft. It was murder on paper. Richard Sterling had orchestrated every step. Blackmailing board members, bribing auditors, falsifying reports until her father's company collapsed. And then a transfer. $4.2 million to an account labeled RS Holdings. Confidential. She stared at the screen, numb. He didn't just destroy her family. He'd profited from it. Tears blurred her vision, but she didn't wipe them away. Instead, she started copying everything. File after file. Proof after proof. Until... Excuse me. She spun around. Ethan stood behind her, wearing a baseball cap, eyes dark with confusion. "What are you doing here?" he asked. Her throat went dry. I was just... He looked past her at the screen. Then at the flash drive in her hand. Realization hit him like lightning. "Is that my drive?" he whispered. Amara froze. He stepped closer. "What is this, Amara? Why do you have files from my father's company?" She swallowed hard. "Because your father destroyed mine." The words fell between them like a confession. Sharp, heavy, undeniable. Ethan's eyes widened. "What?" "He took everything from us. My father. He tried to expose Richard and he killed his career instead. Left us with nothing. Came here to survive. But now," she held up the drive. "Now I have proof." He stared at her, shock and disbelief warring on his face. "You can't be serious. Look at the files, Ethan." He hesitated, then leaned in. His face drained of color as he scrolled. This can't be real." "It's real," she whispered. "And now you know what kind of man your father is." He looked at her, torn. "If you expose him, he'll destroy you." He already did. Their eyes locked, hers steady, his trembling. Finally, he exhaled, rubbing his temples. "You shouldn't have come here alone. I've been alone for a long time." He looked at her for a long moment, then whispered, "Let me help you." She didn't answer immediately. For months, she'd built this plan by herself, trusting no one. But as she watched Ethan's face, the fear, the disgust, the dawning courage, something inside her softened. Maybe she could use that. Maybe she needed to. Finally, she nodded. "Then help me finish what your father started." Ethan's expression hardened. "You're going to bring him down?" "Yes." He nodded slowly. "Then we do it right. Together." For the first time in a long time, Amara felt something dangerous bloom inside her chest. Not hope. Something sharper. Purpose. Because this wasn't just revenge anymore. This was justice wearing a smile. And she would make sure Richard Sterling heard the sound of his own empire cracking, one quiet, calculated step at a time. The rain had returned by evening, soft at first, then heavy, washing the streets clean of everything but memory. Amara and Ethan sat in his car, parked a few blocks from the mansion. Neither spoke for a long time. The hum of the rain filled the silence between them, steady and unrelenting like a heartbeat. Ethan gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles pale. "I still can't believe it," he said quietly. "All these years, he told me he built everything from nothing." Amara stared through the windshield, her reflection faint in the glass. "He built it on ashes," she said. "On people like my father." He flinched at that, not because she was wrong but because she was right. He turned to her. "So what now? You've got proof. Why not just take it to the press?" She shook her head. "It's not enough. Not yet. The kind of men your father deals with, they bury stories. By silence. Erase people." He swallowed. "You've thought this through." "For months," she replied. "Every lie. Every secret. Every step." Her voice was calm, but there was something beneath it. Steel wrapped in sorrow. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time. She wasn't just the quiet maid who served tea and smiled politely. She was something else entirely. A storm disguised as stillness. "Then what's the plan?" he asked. She opened her bag and pulled out a folded map, the layout of Sterling Global's headquarters. Lines and notes were scribbled in blue ink. I need access to his internal servers, she said. The drive has partial data, but the real records are hidden in the company vault system. It's air-gapped, no internet access, no cloud backups. The only way in is physically. He blinked. You want to break into Sterling Global? Amara's gaze didn't waver. Yes. He leaned back, letting out a shaky laugh. You're insane. Maybe, she said. But I'm also right. Her tone wasn't loud, but it cut through the air like a blade. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. That place is guarded like a bank. I can't even get in without clearance. Then I'll use yours. He turned sharply. You want me to risk everything? You already are, she interrupted. By sitting here with me. The truth of it hung between them, heavy and sharp. Ethan's voice softened. You know, if we get caught, he'll destroy us both. Amara smiled faintly. Then let's make sure we don't get caught. They spent hours planning. By the time the rain had slowed to drizzle, they'd mapped out every movement, security shift changes, elevator routes, system access points. Amara handled the strategy with frightening precision. Every detail accounted for. Every possibility covered. Ethan watched her work, torn between admiration and fear. There was no hesitation in her, only focus, as if she'd already accepted the cost of what she was about to do. When she finally leaned back, exhaustion flickering in her eyes, Ethan spoke quietly. Why are you doing this alone? She looked at him. Because I've always been alone. No, he said, shaking his head. I mean, why not just run? Take the files, disappear. You could start over. She smiled sadly. You don't start over from ashes, Ethan. You rebuild from them. That answer stayed with him long after she said it. The next morning, Ethan returned to the mansion first. His father was in the courtyard, laughing over coffee with a foreign investor. The sound made Ethan's stomach turn. Richard noticed him and smiled. Morning, son. You're up early for once. Yeah, Ethan replied, forcing a smile. Couldn't sleep. Good. Maybe that'll make you useful today. He gestured to the guest beside him. This is Mr. Huang. We're finalizing the Singapore merger. I'll need you to review the documents this evening. Ethan nodded. Sure. He could feel the hypocrisy in his throat like bile. His father's voice, so calm, so proud, now sounded hollow. Richard placed a hand on his shoulder. You'll inherit all this someday, Ethan. Everything I built. Ethan smiled weakly, and thought, everything you stole. That night, Amara slipped into the Sterling Global building wearing a gray service uniform. Ethan had arranged her entry under a cleaning contractor's ID. Her steps echoed in the marble hallways. Cameras blinked in the corners, but Ethan's temporary override, timed precisely, turned them to static for 60 seconds. That was all she needed. She entered the lower archive floor, badge in hand, and reached the locked vault room. The steel door towered before her, humming faintly with power. She inhaled slowly and plugged Ethan's flash drive into the panel. A moment later, click. Access granted. Inside, the room glowed with cold blue light. Dozens of servers lined the walls, their fans humming like whispers. Amara approached the main console and connected her own device. Data flooded the screen. Documents, emails, encrypted ledgers. Every secret her father had died trying to expose was here. She copied everything. And as she waited, she whispered to the darkness. This is for you, Dad. But outside the vault, footsteps approached. Her pulse spiked. She shut down the terminal, yanked out the drive, and ducked behind a pillar. 2 guards entered, their radios buzzing faintly. Thought I saw a blip on camera 6, one said. Probably another glitch. These systems act up every time it rains. Still, check the vaults. Amara's breath caught. The men stepped closer, flashlights sweeping the room. One beam passed inches from her face, then shifted away. Nothing here, the first said. Let's go. They left. Amara stayed frozen until the door sealed again, her lungs burning from holding her breath. When she finally exhaled, it came out shaky but determined. She had it. Everything. By the time she met Ethan at the edge of the pier, the sky was just starting to pale. He stood waiting, hands buried in his pockets, the wind tugging at his coat. "Did you get it?" he asked. She nodded, holding up the drive. "Every secret. Every transaction. Enough to bury him 10 times over." Ethan exhaled, relief flooding his face, then guilt. "My father's going to know it was me," he said quietly. "He's not stupid." "Then don't give him the satisfaction of fear," Amara replied. "Stand tall. Pretend you're on his side until the end." He looked at her. "And what about you?" "I was never on his side." For a moment neither spoke. The city was waking around them, soft lights flickering in windows, the sound of seagulls over the water. Ethan took a slow step closer. "You know," he said, "I don't think I've ever met anyone like you." She smiled faintly. "That's probably a good thing." He laughed softly. "Maybe not. You make everyone else seem small." She met his eyes. "You make me remember what hope feels like." The words slipped out before she could stop them. And for a fleeting second, the revenge, the anger, the years of pain, all of it fell quiet. Just two broken people standing in the wind, realizing they'd become each other's only truth. But then Amara's phone buzzed. She checked it and froze. Unknown number. One message. "We know what you took." Her smile vanished. Ethan's expression hardened as he read it over her shoulder. "They're on to us." Amara pocketed the phone. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned. "Then it's begun." The morning after the message, the Sterling mansion felt colder. Not in temperature but in air, in presence. Like the walls themselves had learned to listen. Ethan noticed it first. The way the staff whispered less. The way his father's assistants avoided eye contact. Even the housekeeper, who'd always greeted him with a warm smile, looked uneasy as she handed him his coffee. Something was wrong. Then came the call. "Sir," a voice said through the line, one of Richard's security chiefs. "We've had a breach at headquarters. Someone accessed the vault servers last night." Ethan's heart stuttered. "What did they take?" "Everything." He forced his voice steady. "How did it happen?" "We're still checking." Whoever it was, they knew what they were doing. Surveillance feeds glitched for exactly 60 seconds. "We're running ID traces now." Ethan swallowed hard. 60 seconds. Exactly the window he gave Amara. "I'll tell my father," he said quietly, ending the call. When he entered the study, Richard was already standing by the window, staring out at the gardens like a general surveying a battlefield. "Someone broke into my building," he said without turning. Ethan feigned confusion. "What?" "They bypassed biometric locks, wiped the feed, and took sensitive data. And whoever did it had internal access." Richard finally turned around, eyes sharp and calculating. "You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" Ethan met his father's gaze, masking the panic rising inside him. "Of course not." Richard studied him. Too long. Too quietly. Then he smiled, the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. "Good. Because whoever's responsible won't be breathing by tomorrow." Downstairs, Amara moved carefully through her morning duties, pretending nothing had changed. Her apron was neat, her steps silent, her expression unreadable. But inside, her chest felt like it was full of thunder. That message, "We know what you took," hadn't come from nowhere. Someone had seen her. She could feel eyes on her even now, like shadows clinging to the corners of the mansion. At noon, Mrs. Sterling asked her to set the dining table. When she entered the grand hall, Ethan was already seated, silent, tense. His father joined moments later, flanked by two unfamiliar men in dark suits. "New security advisors," Richard said casually. "After last night's incident." The men nodded politely but said nothing. One of them placed a slim folder on the table beside him. As Amara set down the plates, she caught the faintest glimpse inside. Surveillance stills. Blurry. But one frame, a figure in gray uniform. Her pulse spiked. She forced her hands to stay steady as she poured the wine. Ethan noticed her tremor. Their eyes met for half a second, just enough for her to understand that he knew what was in that folder too. Richard's voice cut through the tension. "It's fascinating," he said, slicing into his steak. "How thieves always think they're smarter than the ones they steal from." Ethan's knife paused midair. "You think it was internal?" "Oh, it was," Richard said easily. "Someone who knew the systems. Someone close enough to predict the camera resets. I built this company on discipline, Ethan. And nothing offends me more than betrayal. He looked directly at his son when he said it. Amara's breath hitched. By evening, the mansion was crawling with security. New guards, new locks, new rules. Amara's cleaning routes were altered, restricted to the east wing. Her access card deactivated for the main floors. They were closing in. She sat in her small quarters that night, back pressed to the door, staring at the flash drive in her hand. Feels heavier now. Not like evidence, like a curse. She thought of her father's voice, soft but resolute. The truth doesn't set you free, Amara. It makes you dangerous. She finally understood what he meant. 2 days passed. Then came the knock. She opened the door to find Ethan, pale and shaken. They know, he whispered. They're tracing access logs. They found the fake ID entry. My father's furious. Her throat tightened. What did you tell him? Nothing. I told him I was out with friends that night. But he doesn't believe me. He's calling in a private investigator. Amara closed her eyes, exhaling slowly. Then it's time. Time for what? For me to stop hiding. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? She turned to her small dresser and pulled out a sealed envelope. Inside, the data she'd copied and a second drive, encrypted with her own system. I'm sending this to the press, she said. Every transaction, every document. Once it's public, he won't be able to touch us. Ethan shook his head. He will. You don't know him like I do. He'll bury it before it spreads. Then I'll make sure it spreads faster. That night, Amara sat in the mansion's old library, the only place cameras hadn't been updated yet, typing furiously on her small laptop. Emails, encrypted tunnels, timed releases. The files uploaded at 3 a.m. sharp. But before she could shut the system down, the door creaked open. Richard Sterling stood in the doorway. Silent. Terrifying. Working late, Miss Williams. Amara froze. Her screen still glowed faintly, the upload bar completed seconds ago. She stood quickly, forcing her voice steady. Just cleaning up, sir. Richard's gaze swept the desk, the open laptop, the faint reflection on the screen. Then slowly he smiled. I know what you did, he said softly. You and my son. The words hit like ice. I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, don't insult me, he cut in. You think I wouldn't recognize the daughter of Michael Williams? The man I destroyed 15 years ago. Her heart stopped. Richard stepped closer, eyes glinting. He was a stubborn fool. Tried to expose me. Just like you. Her voice trembled, but not from fear, from fury. You killed him. He tilted his head. I did what I had to. Business is war, Miss Williams. And your father chose the wrong side. She took a step forward, her hands shaking. And now you've chosen yours. Richard smiled. Be careful, girl. Revenge is a rich man's game. You can't win by playing by our rules. Then he turned and left. Calm as ever, like he hadn't just confessed to murder. Amara stood in the dark, the weight of his words burning through her veins. She wasn't just fighting corruption anymore. She was fighting a ghost that had stolen everything from her family. The next morning, Sterling Global's name exploded across headlines. Illegal deals, fraud, bribery, cover-ups. Reporters flooded the gates. Stock prices crashed. Richard's rage was volcanic. He fired staff, sued networks, and threatened to buy silence. But it was too late, the story was everywhere. Amara watched it unfold from the servant's window. No satisfaction, no joy, just a quiet, simmering ache. She'd exposed him. But the war had only begun. Because as night fell again, another message arrived on her phone. This time it wasn't anonymous. Run, Amara. He knows where you live. She didn't run. She looked at her reflection in the window, the maid's uniform, the tired eyes, and whispered to herself. You took everything from me once, Richard Sterling. Now I'll take everything from you, piece by piece. And for the first time in her life she smiled. Not in hope. The storm didn't come with thunder that morning. It came with silence. The kind that stretches across the walls of a mansion built on fear. Everyone in the Sterling household felt it. The air was different. The servants whispered less, walked slower, and avoided the eyes of their masters as if making eye contact alone could cost them their lives. Richard Sterling hadn't spoken much since the leaks hit the media. But the newspapers told the story for him. Sterling Global under investigation for fraud. Board members demand answers. Billionaire titan faces government scrutiny. In every photo, Richard's face was the same. Cold, unreadable, dangerous. Amara had been up since dawn, scrubbing the floor of the dining hall that gleamed so brightly it mocked her reflection. Her heart hadn't stopped racing since she'd overheard Ethan's late-night conversation with one of the lawyers. The investigation was deepening. People were being questioned. And the moment someone mentioned the word leak, she knew the counterattack was coming. Still, she worked like nothing had changed. That was her weapon, invisibility. When Richard finally entered, the silence broke like glass. He was dressed in charcoal gray, the kind of color that swallows light. His steps were calm, measured, but there was something in his eyes that made every maid drop their gaze instantly. He didn't look like a man under siege. He looked like a man preparing to hunt. "Good morning, Father," Ethan said, rising slightly from his seat. Richard didn't reply. He poured himself coffee, stirred it once, and let the spoon clink against the cup. Once, twice, like a warning bell. Then he spoke. Controlled. Terrifying. "When a lion's den is breached," he said, "he doesn't panic. He studies the tracks. He finds the scent of the one who dared to step inside." The room froze. His gaze swept across the servants, paused just for a heartbeat on Amara, then moved on. "Loyalty," he continued, "isn't proven by words. It's proven when you're cornered. Some of you here will have that chance soon." Amara's fingers trembled slightly on the mop handle, but her face stayed still. She had learned to school her expressions the way soldiers learn to breathe through pain. Ethan shifted uneasily. "Father." "Not now," Richard cut in, voice sharp enough to slice air. "The company's reputation will survive. But I need to know who among us opened the door to our enemies." He took a long sip of coffee. "And I intend to find out." That day, Sterling Global's counterstrike began. Lawyers were summoned, accounts traced, emails pulled from archives. Entire departments at the corporate tower were placed on temporary suspension. By noon, 3 executives were dismissed. By evening, 2 household staff members were gone, escorted quietly out the back gate, their faces pale and eyes wide. Amara's pulse raced every time the heavy front doors creaked open. Clara tried to reassure her. "They won't find anything, Amara. You've been careful." "Careful doesn't matter," Amara whispered back. "He doesn't need proof. Just a feeling." She wasn't wrong. Richard didn't need evidence to destroy people. Suspicion was enough. That night, the storm finally broke. But it wasn't thunder that shattered the peace. It was a scream. Amara dropped the silver tray she was carrying as the sound tore through the corridor. The crash of porcelain echoed like gunfire. She rushed toward the noise. Down the east wing, near the servants' quarters. There she saw 2 men in dark suits dragging someone by the arms. "Clara!" Amara gasped. Clara's hair was disheveled, her cheek bruised, her voice shaking. "Amara, please," they said. I told them I don't know anything." One of the men turned sharply. "Get back to your duties, Maid. This doesn't concern you." Amara froze. She wanted to fight, to scream, but her survival instinct chained her tongue. Richard appeared behind them a few moments later, composed as ever, hands in his pockets. "Clara," he said softly, "I admired your loyalty. I really did. But loyalty without honesty is wasted." "Sir, I swear." "Take her to the gate," he ordered. "And make sure she's escorted properly." His tone made the word escorted sound like exile. Clara's cries echoed through the corridor until the front doors slammed shut. And then there was silence again. Amara's hands clenched at her sides. She kept her face blank as Richard's eyes passed over her. He didn't stop this time. Didn't smile. Just walked away. But Amara knew what had just happened. Clara was gone because of her. That night, she sat alone in her tiny servant's room, the candlelight flickering against her pale face. The world she'd started to build, the secret network, the stolen files, the whispered vengeance, suddenly felt fragile again. Her chest tightened, anger twisting with guilt. She had promised herself she wouldn't cry anymore, but when the memory of Clara's scream replayed, the tears came silently, shaking her body. "I'll make it worth something," she whispered into the darkness. "Your pain won't be wasted, Clara. I swear it." Her gaze drifted toward the small wooden box under her bed. She pulled it out carefully, revealing the hidden USB drives, photographs, and a sleek silver key, the one she had taken from the study weeks ago. Richard's vault key. Every file in that vault could bear the Sterling name. But the risk of using it was higher now. He was watching everyone. Every step. Every breath. Still, as the candle burned lower, Amara's decision solidified. "You took everything from me," she murmured, voice trembling but steady. "Now I'll take everything from you." The next morning, the house was restless. Security guards paced the halls. Even Ethan seemed haunted, the exhaustion etched in his eyes. He found Amara near the back garden, her hands gripping the railing as she watched the gray clouds roll in. "He's going too far," Ethan said under his breath. Clara didn't deserve that. Amara didn't turn to face him. "No one does. You should stay away from him for a while. He's unpredictable when he feels cornered." Her lips curved slightly, not into a smile but into something sharper. "Then maybe it's time someone corners him." Ethan looked at her, a flicker of realization dawning. "Amara, what are you doing? What I should have done a long time ago." She turned to him finally, eyes glistening like tempered glass. For a moment, he saw the woman behind the uniform. Fierce, brilliant, broken. The kind of woman who doesn't just survive monsters. She learns how to kill them. "You don't have to fight him alone," Ethan said quietly. "Let me help." She stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then choose a side, Ethan. Because the next time he draws blood, I won't be cleaning it up." That night she acted. Every door in the mansion had a rhythm. When it opened, how it creaked, which hinges whined loudest. She knew them all by heart now. While the family slept, she moved through the halls like a ghost. Her hands didn't tremble as she slid the silver key into the lock of Richard's private office. Inside, the air smelled of leather and power. She crossed to the safe, large, metallic, and mercilessly still. The lock clicked open, and the LED light inside spilled over stacks of files and hard drives. Transactions, politicians, hidden partners, a map of the empire's sins. She worked fast, transferring data, snapping photographs, memorizing numbers. Every second felt like a lifetime. And just as she closed the safe again, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Her heart stopped. She blew out the candle. The world went black. The footsteps grew louder, slower, then paused right outside the door. "I know someone's there," Richard's voice said softly. Amara's breath caught. She didn't move, didn't blink. A long silence followed, then a low chuckle. "Keep hiding, whoever you are. The lion always finds his prey in the end." The sound of his shoes receded. Only then did she dare to breathe again. But in the darkness she smiled. Because this time the prey had claws. The sun rose over the Sterling mansion like a lie, bright, golden, and pretending nothing had changed. But everything had. Behind that marble facade, the house had become a cage made of whispers. Everyone walked softer, spoke less. And beneath the silence, something ugly was brewing. Richard Sterling had entered his most dangerous mood. Calm. The kind of calm that comes after a storm, when the lion starts stalking the jungle again. For 3 days after Clara's disappearance, no one mentioned her name. Not the servants, not the guards, not even Ethan. But Amara thought about her every second. Her laughter echoing in the corridors, her quiet reassurances when things felt unbearable. Now, every time Amara passed the East Wing, she could almost hear her friend's voice calling out. And she hated herself for being the reason it had gone silent. Still, she couldn't afford guilt. Not now. Not when she finally had something Richard feared, evidence. The flash drive she had taken from his vault was a sleeping dragon. Hidden deep in her pillowcase, it was a weapon she wasn't ready to unleash yet. Not until she understood how to use it without dying first. So she waited. She listened. She learned. That evening, while polishing the glassware in the dining hall, Amara overheard Richard's voice drifting from the study. "It's not the investigation I'm worried about," he said to someone on the phone. "It's the silence. When enemies go quiet, that's when you should fear them." Then a dark chuckle. "They think they've cornered me? No, they've only reminded me who I am." The call ended with the soft clink of crystal against wood. And when Amara dared to glance into the study through the half-open door, she saw him staring at an old family photo. His wife, long gone, and a young Ethan beside him. But Richard wasn't looking at them. He was looking through them. The way predators look past the trees, straight at the thing hiding behind them. Amara withdrew before he sensed her. But that image stayed burned in her mind. A man who had lost everything once before, and would burn the world to keep it from happening again. Later that night, Ethan found her again in the corridor near the kitchen. His sleeves were rolled, his eyes restless. "He knows something," he said quietly. "I can feel it." "He always knows something," Amara replied, not looking up from the dishes. "That's his power." "No, this is different. He's watching me." She turned then, her gaze sharp. "Are you sure it's you he's watching?" Ethan hesitated. "What do you mean?" "He's using you," she said. "You're the bait. If he breaks you, he finds me." The words slipped out before she could stop them. For a second, Ethan just stared at her, realizing she'd spoken like someone with secrets of her own. "What did you do, Amara?" "What I had to," she said, voice low. "The kind of thing people like your father never forgive." He swallowed hard. "You're playing a dangerous game." "No," she whispered, leaning closer. "I'm ending one." That night, Richard called a family dinner. No guests, no laughter. Just 3 people and a silence thick enough to drown in. Amara stood in her usual place behind Ethan's chair, hands folded neatly, eyes downcast. But her mind was a storm. Richard ate slowly, methodically. The only sound was the scrape of silver against porcelain. Then halfway through he set his fork down. "Ethan," he said softly, "did you ever wonder why I chose to rebuild the company after your mother's death?" Ethan frowned. "Because it's your life's work." "No," Richard smiled faintly. "Because revenge is better fuel than love." The table went still. He looked at his son, eyes glinting with dangerous amusement. "You see, when you lose something precious, you have 2 choices. Bleed quietly or make the world bleed with you. I chose the latter." Amara's breath hitched. He wasn't just talking about his past. He was warning her. She felt it, the way his gaze flickered toward her, subtle but sharp. Richard continued, almost casually. "Loyalty, Ethan, is the only currency that never loses value. I hope you remember that." "I've always been loyal," Ethan said carefully. "I know, Oz. That's why I trust you enough to watch the ones I can't." Ethan's fork froze halfway to his mouth. He knew. Somehow Richard knew. Amara's heart thudded so loud she was sure they could both hear it. She bowed slightly, murmured an excuse, and left the room, but not before catching Richard's reflection in the glass door. He was smiling. Not the polite kind. The kind that says, "I'm coming for you." That night, Amara didn't sleep. She sat by her window, the flash drive in her hand, the world outside drowned in silver rain. The mansion lights flickered in the distance, a kingdom built on bones and lies. For the first time, she wondered if vengeance would be enough. If destroying Richard would ever erase what he'd done to her father, to Clara, to her soul. But as the storm raged, a different thought surfaced, one colder, steadier. "It's not about erasing the past," she whispered. "It's about rewriting the ending." The next day Richard made his move. The servants were summoned to the main hall. 20 of them, lined up like soldiers awaiting judgment. He paced in front of them, voice steady as a judge's gavel. "There has been betrayal in this house," he began. "And betrayal spreads like rot. It doesn't stop until the infected part is cut away." No one breathed. "From this moment, no one leaves these walls without clearance. No personal phones. No outside contact. Every room will be monitored." A collective gasp rippled through the line. Amara stood still, her heart sinking. He was turning the mansion into a prison. "I will find who did this," Richard continued. "Even if I have to peel back every layer of loyalty to do it." His eyes met hers for a split second, and lingered. Long enough to tell her that the game was ending. When he dismissed them, Amara fled to the back garden, lungs burning. She wanted to scream, to tear at the flowers she'd once tended like a child's secret. Instead, she whispered to the sky, "You want silence, Richard? I'll give you silence. The kind that comes before the fall." That night, Ethan slipped her a folded note beneath a napkin. "Meet me at the west gate. Midnight." When she arrived, he was waiting under the old oak tree, rain dripping from his hair. "He's watching everything," Ethan said. "I can't keep covering for you. You shouldn't, she replied, voice trembling. It'll destroy you. I don't care, he said fiercely. If it means saving you. Don't, she snapped, cutting him off. Don't try to save me. You don't even know who I am anymore. The silence between them was raw, aching. Finally, Ethan stepped closer. His voice softened. Then tell me who you are, Amara. She looked at him, really looked, and for a second the walls she'd built cracked. He was the only person who saw her beyond the uniform, beyond the mask. But she couldn't afford weakness. I'm the consequence, she whispered, of every sin your father thought he buried. Before he could answer, the faint click of a camera shutter echoed through the rain. They both froze. From the shadows near the wall, a figure lowered a small surveillance drone. One of Richard's men. Run, Amara hissed. They scattered in opposite directions, vanishing into the storm. By morning the mansion was chaos again. New security systems installed. All staff phones confiscated. Richard said nothing at breakfast, but his smile said everything. He had proof now. Not of her actions, but of her connection to his son. And that was enough to weaponize. That evening, as the rain returned, Amara sat in her room, tracing the edge of the flash drive with shaking fingers. She thought of Clara, of her father, of Ethan's desperate face in the storm. She was done reacting. It was time to strike first. You want silence, she whispered. Then I'll make the whole world listen. She plugged the drive into her old laptop. The screen glowed faintly, the files unfolding like buried ghosts. Company bribes, offshore transfers, illegal partnerships, names that would ruin men in every corner of the city. Her lips curved into a small, trembling smile. The lion wanted silence. But she was about to teach him what silence sounds like when it screams. The night was quiet, too quiet. The kind that didn't rest, it just waited. Amara sat in front of the mirror, still wearing the same black dress from the meeting earlier that day. Her hands were steady, but her reflection trembled, a ghost caught between two worlds. The faint hum of the city filtered through her penthouse window, lights blinking like distant eyes watching her. For the first time since everything began, she felt the weight of her own silence. Richard's counterattack had shaken her, not because she was afraid, but because he'd moved exactly like her. No mercy, no hesitation. One of her new suppliers had been arrested that morning. Another had gone missing. Clara's phone had gone straight to voicemail all day. Amara had built her revenge on precision. But this was chaos-controlled chaos, and it was closing in. A knock echoed against the door. Ethan stepped in quietly. No suit tonight, just a gray hoodie and that tired look he wore when he'd been up for 2 days straight. You didn't eat, he said softly. Amara didn't turn from the mirror. You sound like Clara. She'd say the same thing if she was here. Her reflection flinched at that. Clara's name used to be a comfort. Now it was a wound. I'm not hungry, she murmured. You should be, Ethan said, walking closer. You just outplayed one of the most powerful men in the city. You should be celebrating. Amara finally turned to him, her eyes darker than the skyline behind her. Celebrate. You think victory feels like this? Ethan hesitated. It's survival. That's what you wanted. She stood, moving past him to the window. I wanted justice. Survival was never the goal. Outside, the city looked alive, but all she saw were graves. Her father, her past, Clara maybe. Even the version of herself that used to believe kindness could buy loyalty. Ethan leaned against the table, arms crossed. You're changing, Amara. She smirked, though it didn't reach her eyes. You say that like it's a bad thing. I'm saying it because it scares me. She looked back at him. You think this is scary? Try being humiliated. Try cleaning the shoes of the people who destroyed your father. Try hearing them laugh about it. Then tell me what fear feels like. Ethan said nothing. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. He wanted to say she was right. He wanted to say he still believed in her. But every time she looked at him, he saw less of the woman he'd met and more of something else. Something ruthless, unstoppable, and hauntingly calm. Her phone buzzed. Message. No name. Just an image. Clara's bracelet, lying on a cracked pavement. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She didn't breathe for several seconds. Then slowly she turned the phone toward Ethan. They've taken her. Ethan's jaw tightened. Richard. Amara nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. He's not fighting back. He's hunting. Ethan cursed under his breath. What do you want to do? Her eyes returned to the mirror. Her reflection seemed to smile, though she didn't. What I always do, she said. Make him regret being alive. Hours later, the storm outside matched the one in her head. Amara moved like a shadow through her apartment, pulling files, maps, and flash drives into her briefcase. The news was already buzzing. 2 explosions at the port, another accident involving one of her supplier's trucks. Richard's fingerprints were nowhere to be found, but his methods were unmistakable. He wasn't just retaliating. He was sending a message. She would answer it. Ethan entered again, phone to his ear. I've got our tech guy tracing the message. The signal's dirty. Whoever sent it wants to be found, but on their terms. Amara zipped her case. Then we play along. He frowned. You're walking into a trap. She looked up sharply. And what do you think I am? What? A ghost, she said, almost smiling. Traps don't scare ghosts. Ethan stepped closer. Amara, this isn't you. No, she cut in, her voice cold and final. This is exactly who I am. They made me this way. Her phone buzzed again. This time a video. Clara, tied to a chair in some dim warehouse, a bruise on her cheek. A man's voice, calm, mocking, echoed through the recording. Tell your boss the past never dies. It just waits for the right moment to rise again. The video ended. Amara's hand trembled slightly, the first crack in her steel composure. But when she spoke, her tone was ice. Ethan, prepare the car. He hesitated. We don't know where that is. We will, she said. Because if Richard thinks I'll walk into hell to save her. Her gaze hardened. Then he's absolutely right. The night swallowed the city as they drove through the rain. The streets blurred into silver streaks on the windshield. Ethan kept glancing at her. She hadn't spoken a word since they left. Just stared out the window, her mind running through possibilities, patterns, traps within traps. When they finally pulled into the outskirts, an industrial area long abandoned, she felt it. The air was too still. This is it, she said. Amara, wait. Ethan grabbed her wrist. If this is what it looks like, he's not just after you. He's trying to break you. She looked at his hand, then at him. Her voice was low. Then he'll have to try harder. She stepped out into the rain. Every footstep echoed like thunder in her head. The warehouse loomed ahead, black, silent, waiting. She pushed open the metal door. Screeched like a scream. And then a voice. You shouldn't have come alone. Richards. Confident. Her pulse steadied. You took something that belongs to me. Oh, Amara, he said, stepping out of the shadows. Everything you own belongs to me. You just borrowed it. Behind him, Clara was slumped in the chair, breathing but barely conscious. Amara's hand tightened on the small pistol inside her coat. You made one mistake, she said quietly. Richard tilted his head. And what's that? You left me alive. Lightning flashed. A gunshot split the air. Too fast to see, too loud to forget. Someone fell. And then silence. The rain pounded harder. The smell of smoke filled the air. Amara's hand trembled again, but her face stayed unreadable. She took one step forward, then froze. Because in the shattered mirror across the room, her reflection was smiling. But she wasn't. And the faint red dot that danced across her chest told her. This wasn't over. Not even close. The air inside the warehouse was thick with smoke and silence. Amara didn't move. Neither did Richard. The red dot burned against her chest like a heartbeat she didn't own. For a second, time didn't exist. Just the rain outside, the faint whimper from Clara, and the sound of Richard's steady breathing. Put the gun down, he said calmly. His voice echoing off the steel walls. Amara's eyes didn't blink. You first. A smile cut across his face. You think you're in control here. You've forgotten who taught this game. She tilted her head slightly. And you've forgotten I don't play by the rules anymore. The red dot moved, slowly, from her chest to Richard's forehead. His smile faltered. From behind a rusted container, Ethan stepped out, gun raised. His hands trembling slightly but his aim steady. I'd put that gun down if I were you, Ethan said quietly. Richard's eyes flicked between them, A small laugh escaped his lips. So this is what it comes to. The little maid and her bodyguard against a lion. Ethan's voice was cold. Lions bleed too. For a few seconds, everything balanced on silence. Then a sound broke it. Click. The unmistakable sound of a safety being released. But it wasn't from Ethan. It came from the catwalk above them. Amara's gaze snapped upward. Two shadows, rifles aimed. "Ethan!" she shouted. Gunfire ripped through the warehouse. Sparks flew. Concrete shattered. Clara screamed. Amara dove behind a metal crate, her pistol drawn. Ethan rolled across the floor, returning fire. Richard vanished into the smoke like a ghost that knew every corner of the place. Bullets rang like thunder. The smell of gunpowder filled the air. Amara crawled toward Clara, heart pounding. "Stay with me, okay? Clara, look at me." Clara's eyes fluttered open. Pain and fear mixed in them. I knew you'd come. Always," Amara said, cutting the ropes from her wrists. "Now move." They stumbled toward the side door, Ethan covering them. One of the gunmen above fell with a scream, hitting the floor with a sickening thud. "Go!" Ethan yelled. "I'll hold them." "No," Amara shouted back. "We must leave together." Ethan fired again. "You'll die if you stay." Something exploded. One of the barrels, ignited by a stray bullet. The blast threw Amara and Clara forward. Metal rained from the ceiling. When Amara opened her eyes, her ears rang. Her vision blurred. The warehouse was a firestorm. "Ethan!" she screamed. No answer. Just crackling flames and the groan of collapsing steel. She dragged Clara through the side exit, coughing, eyes stinging from the smoke. Outside, the rain poured like judgment from heaven. They reached the car. The windshield cracked, the tires half-burnt. Amara turned just once, staring at the inferno that swallowed the warehouse. In movement. Through the flames, a figure stumbled out. Burned bloody but alive. "Ethan." She ran to him, catching him as he fell. His breathing was shallow. His shirt was soaked with blood. Hey, don't you dare," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Don't you dare leave me now." Ethan gave a weak smile. "Guess I'm not bulletproof after all." "You idiot," she whispered, pressing her hand against his wound. "You weren't supposed to be the hero." He laughed faintly. Someone had to make sure the ghost got out alive. Tears blurred her vision, mixing with the rain. "You're not dying. Do you hear me? You're not." His eyes met hers. Almost peaceful. "You were right, you know." "About what?" "That fear," his voice cracked. "Fear feels a lot like love." And then he went still. Amara froze, her breath catching, her heart screaming louder than the thunder. For a moment she didn't move. Couldn't. Her mind refused to believe what her eyes saw. Then something inside her broke. Quietly. Completely. She looked up at the burning warehouse, her reflection flickering in the puddle beneath her. The ghost in the mirror was gone. Only the lion remained. Clara touched her shoulder weakly. "Amara." But Amara stood, drenched, silent, eyes locked on the flames. Richard had escaped. The city would call it a gang war. The media would spin it into noise. But she knew what it really was. A declaration. A war for the soul she'd already buried. She wiped the blood from her hand and whispered, almost to herself, "He took my father. He took my life. And now he's taken the only man who ever saw me." Her voice hardened, the tremor fading. "I'll burn his world down to the roots." The rain fell harder. Sirens wailed in the distance. Clara tried to speak, but Amara was already walking toward the car, her silhouette framed by the burning light. And as lightning split the sky, her reflection shimmered one last time, a silent, broken woman staring back at herself. Then she blinked, and the ghost was gone. All that remained was a queen being born from fire.